Hi, this is Sister Too Funky coming to you live from the Museum of Uncut Funk, and today we have with us Josiah Howard, author of Blaxploitation Cinema. Josiah, how are you today?
How are you, Pamela? Good to see you.
Good to see you. As I mentioned earlier, it's been a while since we've last spoken, and I want to thank you before we start for taking time out of your schedule to do this interview for the Museum of Uncut Funk. We're really happy to have you here today.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you. So what I'd like to get started asking you is, talk to our audience about the reasons why you decided to write this book in case some of them are not familiar with your work.
Okay, that's a good question. I love the blaxploitation films. I'm a man of a certain age. I'm 50 this year, and so I came of age during the time when you're very impressionable, early 70s, and they were images that I had seen on posters and on buses and on outside of movie theaters that were like the images of the people in my life. Before that, the only pictures I saw or images I saw of African Americans were Sidney Poitier. You see it on TV, all of the old shows. Well, that would be from the 60s, or the 50s or earlier. The new image was the afro and the fashion and the attitude. And that really was the first time I saw people that I thought looked like me. And it really made me excited. It really made me really excited because I wasn't allowed to go and see them. I was too young. But I would stand outside and look at the posters and then go home and draw them and got involved that way. And then, of course, I snuck into a few of the theaters. But that's how my interest in the film started. And then from that point on, I collected, this is before video and DVD, so I collected what I could, magazine articles and books, there weren't very many, on the subject. And then I toyed with writing a book, but then I thought, nobody's really going to be interested in this, and there aren't enough films to write a book about. So once I got past that, I started looking into it. There were enough films. I thought if there's 100 films, well, then I'll write a book about it. It'll be a slim book with lots of pictures. Well, the book has 250 films in it. And there are more, depending on what kind of definition you want to take for the genre. But I wrote it because I was thrilled by the images. I got an early jolt. And I thought no one else had written about it in a way that was very interesting.
Well, I have to tell you, as a collector of the movie posters from this era, I found your book to be very helpful in finding the movie posters that I did not have in my collection. So I was very excited when the book came out. So I thank you.
Good.
What I'd like to know is, how do you define blaxploitation? Because there are a number of films that you've included in this guide that someone like myself may not have considered to be a blaxploitation film.
You're not the only one. I did a bunch of radio interviews when the book came out, and that was the question that would always come in. Well, Lady Sings the Blues is a blaxploitation film. What are you talking about? Claudine is in a blaxploitation film. Why are you? And so my criteria, and I went back to it again and again, was black themed or black cast films that were made between 70 and 80 that were featured blacks, obviously, but also heavily promoted to the black community in the 70s. So that would include a lot of films with white stars that had an incidental or secondary black African American player with a modern-minded plot going on. You had the afro, or you had the attitude, and so there are a lot of films. I call them gray area films that people were like, that's not a blaxploitation film, sorry. And I hear that, but my criteria was 70 to 80, any film that was basically promoted to blacks.
Yes.
And all those films that piggybacked on what was obviously a blaxploitation film, but they made it a little bit more watered down for everyone else.
Yes. I have to ask you, how did you feel in doing this research? How did you feel about the black protest that came about during this time when these films were being made?
They didn't bother me, and I think they're an exciting part of the story. I mean, black people aren't, we're not one thing. We all have different opinions. Some of us are Democrats, some are Republicans, some are Mormons, or whatever they are.
Right.
And so that goes, some blacks are not going to want to see a pimp and a hoe, and some are going to say, that's fun. We have pimp and hoes in our community too, and that's fine. So I thought it was fun. I think it makes the whole story of blaxploitation much, much more interesting. The idea that it was coming from us wasn't coming from white people; it was coming from us.
Hmm.
I think it's fascinating that there was a certain segment that were not ready to accept the whole diaspora of African Americans on the screen.
You know, it's interesting you have that type of spin on it because I guess from a political perspective, you know, you had CORE and NAACP and a number of other organizations out there, you know, that were fighting against these films being made. But in my mind, this is what was going on in the community.
Hmm.
Whether, you know, you like you said, you wanted to accept it or not, this is actually what was going on. You know, these things were affecting people's lives in such a way that, okay, maybe it didn't have to be put on the big screen, but it was what it was. And
Hmm.
you know, I think those stories need to be told as well, or needed to be
Uh-huh.
told as well. So I think it was
I,
very unfortunate that they were stopped
mhm.
being produced because of the protests.
I agree with you on that point, but I would say that no one stopped going to see them. You know, when all of these things were put together. In fact, it made them more attractive. Oh, we're
Hmm.
not supposed to see that.
Right.
You know, Grandma said, well, "That's a bad film. We're not supposed to see that." You know, you can imagine the kids running to see that one. Um, I disagree with you in with the whole argument that the protests were the reason it stopped. Is that what you believe? That
Well,
really nailed the nail in the coffin?
not entirely. I think it affected the way Hollywood proceeded in making these films because they
Agreed.
didn't want to go up against the grain of what the NAACP was out saying about the films, and you know, the stereotypes that are being portrayed. And then you had CORE, who was saying the same thing about these films. So I don't think Hollywood wanted to get in the midst of this, you know, this stuff that was going on at the time. So they just
Agreed.
decided to, well, let's go make these films where we won't have protests. We'll stop making all of these black films. And
Hmm.
I think it was, you know, the wrong thing to do
Hmm.
as far as Hollywood was concerned.
And you don't believe that they had just played their cycle? That you know.
I think no, I don't think they played their cycle because I think a lot of actors and actresses didn't have the opportunity to grow within their craft. I think some of them could have gone further and developed their skill and
Hmm.
become greater in what they were doing, as opposed to making these types of films and then they stopped and then they couldn't find work anymore. So,
Hmm.
for instance, your Gloria Hendry, she could have continued to blossom as an actress and maybe have done, westerns or, different types of films that would have, honed in her skills, as opposed to her being, a sex symbol slash badass female actress in, that was pigeonholed in certain types of films.
Hmm. Okay.
So tell me, you had an opportunity to speak to a lot of directors. You know, we had the pleasure of building a relationship with Cirio Santiago.
Oh, cool.
We thought we had this grand idea to try to get the rights to what was it?
TNT Jackson.
TNT Jackson. So we were doing a lot. We had a lot of conversations with him, and unfortunately, Quentin Tarantino, whose wallet is a little bit bigger than ours, got the rights to the film. But talk to me about your experience in talking to the directors. What was that like for you?
It was very informative, and you know, Pam, is it Pam or Pamela?
Either.
Because we're getting down now.
Either, whichever you're
Um,
comfortable with.
it it was fun when I wrote the book. I had not, and this is something sorry, I don't get to often tell. I wrote the book and did all of the reviews and got all the pictures and was ready to go with it and shopped it. There were no director interviews. And then I got a book deal, first one that I didn't go with. This is a British publisher, the one that got the book. And they said, okay, we're going to put you on a time schedule. It'll be 6 months. I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's fine. You know, it took me 2 years to write it. So during those 6 months, I thought, well, what else can I do? I said, let's talk to the directors. So that really, even though I think it's one of the most powerful parts of the book, that was an afterthought. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
you get when you have a little extra time. Um, it was very informative, and I was so happy that they were still with us. I assume that they were grown men at the time when they were directing. Some were a little contentious. and some had stories that I hadn't heard before. I was afraid that they would just be saying the same things, like actors often do. But they were interesting. Serial was fascinating. It took a long. I remember it took a long time to get him. I called. We had made several appointments, and he wasn't available when I called, and that happens. And so after maybe 4 calls, I got him, and he was very interesting. Such a humble man.
Yes.
So uncomfortable with compliments or praise. And I came away remembering that. I thought, that's pretty incredible.
So, tell me about your experience with Jack Hill, because he's had, this fantastic relationship with Pam Grier and making films with her. What was that like, just sitting down talking to him? I mean, did he talk about his experience with Pam and making those films?
He did, and you're going to get another story that I don't often tell. Jack Hill, I had asked to write the foreword to my book, and along with the interview. First, actually, I asked for the foreword, and then I asked for the foreword. Yeah, before I got the director, thought I should interview directors. I asked for the foreword, and he wrote a foreword that I didn't like, and we went back and forth with that. He's a writer, he's a writer. He wants his words exactly the way they were.
Right.
I had some questions about how they represented, what was behind the word forward. And so we went back and forth on that. And then as I expanded and talked to directors, I called him up again, and we did the director interview. But he was fun. His stories weren't ones that I hadn't heard before, most of them.
Okay.
But he was very entertaining and very nice, and I liked talking to him very much.
I think my favorite director from that time is Matt Cimber.
Yes.
He did the Candy Tangerine Man.
Yeah.
And I remember we were watching that film, and I was just like, okay. Some of the films, I have to be honest with you, it takes a minute for me to have to sit down and get myself together to watch them.
Yeah.
They're a little painful.
Yeah,
that
the
film,
hand on the garbage disposal will do that, yeah.
Yeah, that film really was like, okay, this man is a loving father and husband during the day, and he's a pimp at night.
Yeah.
I mean, if this isn't classic blaxploitation, I don't know what is. But
he was fun. He was fun to
fun?
talk to. Yeah, I remember him. He was very, very fun.
Because
he was candid. He used frank language, and he also had a good idea of what he was doing. He wasn't pretending that it was something that it wasn't. And that I found that with Jonathan Kaplan too, who, as we know, goes on to win the Oscar for The Accused with Jodie Foster. He was also very fun, and lots of FUs and son of a bitches and all of that, and a lot of fun. Yeah, he called me back to give me some more quotes. Did you get enough? So he was pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh, that must have been awesome to have that experience, to have a sit down and talk to them. So I do envy you.
Yeah. I didn't think about it, Pamela, when I was doing it. It was just, I thought it started with 5. I said, let's get 5 director interviews. And I did that, and I said, well, let's go to 10. And so I was more concerned with the scheduling and all that stuff. I wasn't really awed, or even though these were, my idols and created the art that inspired me and shaped me. I was really in professional mode, and then it was afterwards. It was really only until I saw it in print. Everything is talk until you see it in print.
Right.
And then when I saw it in print, I thought, oh my goodness, I interviewed those people. I wrote that down. I copied their, So it was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The most memorable director, well, you know that Gordon Parks didn't want to talk to me.
Yes.
I called him up and got his secretary or assistant, and she was professional. And then he called back, not professional.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a bad day or not, but he, and you never know how the information was presented to him.
Right.
There's this tacky blaxploitation book coming out, and this guy wants to talk about your blaxploitation films. He's going to say, who knows what was said, but he said, Mr. Howard, I am not at all interested in your project. I'm not at all flattered that you would dare to call my films blaxploitation. They are cinema that have African Americans in them. And, we went on for a little bit. And that was his response to it. Yeah.
It's funny because I was talking to a professor yesterday, or day before yesterday, and we were talking about a lot of, you try to get these interviews with these directors and celebrities who, created these films, and they were a major impact on my life, and as I'm sure yours as well. And for them to not want to discuss it,
Hmm.
it's almost like it was a bitter pill, or it was so long ago and I'm not doing that type of work anymore. That's why I think, for those films to be stopped by these, big organizations of that time, they did more damage than good. And
Hmm.
because Denise Nicholas, she doesn't want to talk about anything to do with blaxploitation, although I don't consider her films to be, blaxploitation. She doesn't want to have anything to do with the 70s because we've tried to reach out to her. So to hear that, about Gordon Parks, it's really very telling. It's like you guys just don't understand what impact that these films had on a generation of people, especially coming out of the
Yeah.
1960s. And, I
So
could just listen to the
inspiring. Yeah.
stories all day long.
Yeah.
So it's too bad, but I guess,
I also respect, I also respect the idea that want to redefine what we did, and we think differently about things as we get older.
yes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So he was thrilled to do it at the time, right? But at 65 or
Yeah.
70, I know he's passed, he wasn't thrilled to go back,
Yeah.
and he might have thought it was a big deal.
Yeah, but look, we still love the work. That's what's most important. So tell me, who's your favorite, what is your favorite film? In
The
all
all-time
this
favorite
research
one,
that you did, what was your favorite film?
absolutely, it's coffee.
Coffee, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that
Is
one.
that your
Oh,
number one too?
well, no, actually, she
You
probably
said
is.
Superfly in one of the interviews I saw you do.
Yes, Superfly, but I also have to give homage to Tamara Dobson and Cleopatra Jones. The more
Mm.
I think about that film, the more I just think it was just so well put together.
Hmm.
And, she was a badass in the film, but in such a sophisticated way. The way she fought, the way she handled her weapons, the way she drove her cars, the way she loved her men. It was just like, oh my God, it was just a fantastic film. And then she was so fashionable with this big afro. And,
Hmm.
I love Pam Grier to death and love Foxy Brown and Coffee, but there's just something about Cleopatra Jones that it's just a fantastic film in my world. So,
So it's equal to you in your mind to coffee.
um, yes and no. I think I would say Cleopatra Jones first and then Coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, and I'm a huge Pam Grier fan.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. So, listen, okay, Coffee is your favorite film. How about your favorite actor or actress?
Um, the first one that comes to my mind is Ron O'Neal.
Yes,
Who knew he was so versatile?
I
You know,
know.
The Hitter. Did
Yeah,
you know that one that came out that no one has seen?
and I haven't seen it either. I hate to admit it. I haven't seen
That
it.
is he's really, really good in it.
Really.
There's tears and disappointment, and it comes from the stage, so you get to see it all in that film where he's not just shooting people up. It was great. Yeah, I think he comes to mind, but favorite actor, he's the one that most surprised me. But I love Richard Roundtree too.
Yes.
I love that cool thing, that understated thing that he does. Very good. And Jim Brown,
Yes.
beautiful man to look at,
Mhm.
and just he's another one that's got that smooth thing that's so perfect.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you mention Ron O'Neal and Richard Roundtree. They're both classically trained actors. And I don't think, well, and I can't say this that like I know it, but I don't think people really take into consideration that these were not, actors that just went to Hollywood and was looking to make their first film. These were classically trained actors, and that's why, I guess I kind of come off like, well, these films shouldn't have been stopped because these actors had such a far way to go because
Hmm.
of their training. And even the ones that weren't classically trained, again, they could have blossomed within their crafts. So, when you think about these types of actors, and they some of them went to school for this type of training, and they're really awesome.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
I digress again.
No, you're
So
right.
let's see here. Tell me, what are your thoughts on Black Dynamite?
Uh, hmm. I was interviewed for a article that appeared in the LA Times. It was about the film when it came out, and I don't let's see how I want to put it. I was quoted as saying it's appreciated but not necessary,
Hmm.
and it's fun. And there's a whole new generation of kids who don't know what we know,
Exactly.
so it's useful in that it brings the whole idea of the blaxploitation cycle to them. But I'm not a big fan of homages. Are you? What do you think of it?
Um, I had the opportunity of seeing the premiere of the film,
Okay.
and I think I need to see it again to really appreciate what they're trying to do.
First impression?
It was a little long,
Hmm.
and I enjoyed the fact that they were paying homage to the films. I liked the characters. I liked the campiness of it. So, in one respect, I got it and I enjoyed it for the moment. But I have to admit that I'm a huge fan of the animated series. A
Hmm.
huge fan. Yes, I try to tweet and watch the series when it comes on, and I can't do both. And I guess I'm telling my age. But it is so in your face and so raw, and that's what those films were at that time. Not
Hmm.
all of them. So it takes me back to that perspective. I like the in your face and rawness of the animated series, and I
Okay.
think I prefer the animated series more so than the movie. So, but with that said, what do you think of the films of today?
Black cast films or generally?
Black cast films, and then you can, give us your take on films in general.
Well, what was the big one that the young woman won an Oscar for? The Help.
Yes.
Well, what did you think?
I haven't seen The Help because I just feel like movies like that don't need to be made today. That was my first opinion. And then I said, well, my mother read the book and she loved the book, but my mom is from a different generation.
Uh huh.
And I don't know how I really feel about it. I don't know if I really want to see it. And it's not that I, don't want those stories to be told. I just feel like we have so much history that do we need to keep telling that type of story?
Hmm.
And again, if I'm looking at it wrong, then I do plan to see it. I just haven't seen it as of yet.
Hmm. I saw it on a plane to Brazil, a 12-hour flight, and nothing to do but watch a movie. And I sat stone faced, and I thought it was so predictable and uninteresting on every level. But I will tell you, all around me on that plane, everyone was crying.
Really.
The sniffles, the sobbing, the choking up. And I thought, well, okay, this is why it's a big hit. Because whatever it is I'm missing, these people are not missing. So that was my experience. Everyone appreciated it around me. So I think I've got to really, I don't know where I'm coming from, but it was a big deal to everybody.
And if I saw it on a plane going to Brazil, I probably would be stone faced too. So I feel like I can understand why you may have felt that way because I'm not, I don't want to say that the let's take it to the streets person would have, come out in me, but I don't know. There's just something about films like that, and maybe I shouldn't even say this. That I just feel like they shouldn't be made,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with them. I've sat and watched Gone with the Wind. Did we need to see that, 2 years ago on what was it, TNT? No, but you know. So I guess it really depends on the film and obviously the storyline. But I haven't seen that, and to be quite honest with you, I'm so focused on doing stuff for the website that I haven't really been to the movies as much as I would like to go.
Hmm. I don't
And
go too much either. Yeah.
so I try to wait for it to come on HBO.
Hmm.
Oh, my secret is out.
There is
So
something to say, Pamela, though, about seeing a movie the way it's supposed to be seen, and that's
yeah,
in a theater.
yeah,
So I'm always hesitant to talk about, the real experience of seeing these films. When we've seen most of them on, the kids will, are going to see, 99% of all the films they see
hmm,
on a device or on a laptop. That,
yes,
how they're, if they're interested in cinema, that's how they're going to see things. And we saw them at retrospectives. We saw them on a big screen. We could
yeah,
smell the theater and the popcorn. So that's a whole different thing. I'm not even saying it's less, but it's different.
right,
It's
right.
miniaturized.
So what is your opinion on the legacy of these films? Since a lot of them are coming up on the 40th anniversary, a number of them will be coming up on their 40th anniversary. What is your take on the legacy of these films?
Very special, one of a kind, never to be repeated. A really, really informative and exciting look at a particular time in our history. It really is the first time that we came into ourselves on screen. Of course, we'd come into ourselves before, but it was kind of an idealized fantasy thing, the Sidney Poitier doctor thing, or helpmate, or teacher. Mm-hmm. And wonderful. That's what we need. You have to crawl before you walk. But this was not walking. This was running.
Right.
This was really, really an exciting time. Captured on film. There have been many exciting times in history. Cinema comes in 1900. Mm-hmm. But this was an exciting time captured on film, and it's really fun.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think there'll ever be a time like this in cinematic history again, where so many films were made in a decade that spoke to what was going on for a specific group of people. Mm-hmm. I just don't see it happening again in that capacity.
I don't think so. No. Mm-hmm.
No. Well, listen, before we end, there's one question I do have to ask you as a collector. How did you source all of those posters for your book?
I'd like to tell you that that's why I went with this publisher. They're called Fab Press, mm-hmm. and they're a British publisher of film books. And the first one that I was going to get it was what's the name of that book? They're a scholarly book publisher. I can't think of their name, but they were going to have 30 pictures in the book. Okay. That's it. They'll choose 30 photos. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to text it fine. We just want 30 pictures. I said, well, it's a visual genre. We're talking about cinema. We're describing images. Maybe we should have images. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should have the promotional art that promoted the images. And so that's why I went with Fab Press, who wanted 300 pictures minimum. And I think there's 400 in the book. I provided maybe 30% of those images. They came up, and they're in Britain. So this is a genre that means something to everybody everywhere. Exactly. They came up with the rest without me saying anything. Right. And in that book are many images, I needed films, because I had to see them and review them, that I had never seen before. Who knew there was a poster for Force 4? Who knew there was a poster for Bad, Black, and Beautiful? Right, right. Yeah, the art director of this book was a fan of the genre, and they came up with so many things I never knew about. Wow, that's awesome. It was a lot of fun, yeah. To have someone as excited as you, with the things that you hadn't seen before. I pretty much knew a lot. I wrote a book about it. They came up with most of it. Well, I have to tell you, as I mentioned earlier, I do use your guide to help source material for the collection for the museum. And there's so many posters that I've come across, I was like, wow, I didn't even know this person played in this movie, let alone this poster existed. I think the one that I discovered in your book is The Father Black Enough? That's a good one, isn't it? Gosh, it's beautiful. I'm like, oh my gosh, how come I've never seen this one before? Where have I been? I hadn't seen that one either. And I have been looking for that poster ever since, and I cannot find it anywhere. I can find reproductions, but I cannot find it anywhere. Yeah. So, for those collectors out there, this is the book that you must get. It is a must-have. It has every poster in it that is from the genre. And you know what, Josiah, I want to thank you again for taking time out. This has been long overdue, and I am just so happy that you were able to be a part of this and make this interview happen. I am very grateful to you. Thank you for having me. It's been great, Pamela. I hope to talk to you again. Well, actually, I would like you to keep us posted on, your upcoming work. And if we could interview you again about what you're doing, some of your current material, we would love to do that and love to help promote it on the museum. And anything we can do to help you, we're open to do it. Okay, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.